So I'm here with Clarence Green, Chief of University Police, here to talk about his profession in light of recent events going around the country with police and protests. Here to talk about his profession here at Northwest. So Clarence, how you doing today?
Doing well, so glad that you're here.
I'm glad you're here as well. How long have you wanted to be a police officer and why?
Wanted to be a police officer all my life. It's something that I believe that you kind of have a calling to do, and I definitely had that calling. It was a need to serve, to help, to want to benefit a community. So those are the reasons why that I have a strong urge to want to see people do well, and I feel like I could have that sphere of influence within my role.
And did you have that at a young age?
I believe so. I believe it started at a young age, that I always wanted to be around people and assist them. Although I'm kind of got a little bit of an introverted personality, I've always had a way about lending a hand to help someone up with things, whether it was raking leaves in my community for someone or helping someone clean up an item or fix something. I've always had a calling just to help people.
Okay, interesting. In your opinion, what is the role of police in society?
I believe that it's currently being redefined for us, and what's interesting about the time is we got an opportunity to help define it also. But I really believe that that role is to have unyielding trust, because everything is built on that trust. If we trust in our community will trust in us, and therefore we can achieve great things. But our primary mission is to serve and protect, but it's really through service and protection. If we can focus on trust, everything else will take care of itself.
Wow, great point. In light of recent events in New York and Ferguson, Missouri, do you think some police officers have lost sight of that role? Why or why not?
I would say so. Police it's part of our larger society. Or do we have some bad college professors? Do we have some bad administrators? Do we have some bad police? For sure. Have some of us lost sight of that role? For sure. I think sometimes in the day-to-day job, it brings on it more, because a lot of times we're dealing with folks who are at their final straw. Either someone's a victim of a crime, so they're going through some sort of a crisis, or they're an offender of a crime, so they're in a crisis. So we're generally dealing with people when they're at their worst. So I think when you do that over and over again, you have a tendency to harden some things that perhaps we shouldn't. What we have to think about within our profession is, how do we recharge that battery every time those officers take that uniform off? We have to think about new ways of training and development so they can stay inspired and stay sharp, keep those personal skills sharp, because everyone is not your enemy. We have to be able to give that trust so that we can get it back.
Okay, great. Do you sympathize with the protesters, the protests going on around the country, and do you think there's reforms that protesters and police can agree on?
I do, and I sympathize on all levels of it. I think it's sad that we're living in a time where we have to have those, where we've had a breakdown. Because I believe that's a fact. Something went wrong to where we're not as connected with the community anymore, therefore they're upset. What I would like to know, though, is what I don't have a clear picture of is, what do we want to achieve from the protests? What are some bulleted items? So then that we can attack them. Because without really a list, we can't just aim at everything. I believe one part of it's developing trust. But really we need to hear from those folks who are upset or not satisfied with us, to lay out what are those things are, because then we need to come back and say, here's what we can do to repair those, so then we can be held accountable to them. So we got to have a list.
Yeah, exactly. I think that something that protesters and police are agreeing on right now is the use of cameras, and I think Northwest, your police department is kind of ahead of the curve in some ways in that area.
But still, we have to have a better understanding of it. What the public believes, I think, when they hear cameras, they believe that camera's on from when that officer starts the shift to the end. Well, the cameras, the battery life doesn't last that long, so you have to turn them on. And then, but the reason I say trust is essential, there's going to be moments when something happens at the heat of the moment, and that officer's going to be eating lunch at the Union. Someone's going to walk up and punch a guy in the face, and that officer, I don't want him to think about turn the camera on before I'm engaged. I'm thinking, get to engaging. And we got to be able to trust that that officer do all the right things. So a lot of it's got to be built on trust. Did that officer turn the camera on at the right time? So I think when we have trust, a lot of these other extra technology things that will help. and we'll help demonstrate what has happened.
Yeah.
It'll work a little bit better.
Yeah. Has your view of the police changed since you became an officer? Why or why not?
It has, greatly. I think I have a better understanding after being a police officer for several years, and more of an appreciation of what police are trying to accomplish. So it's definitely made me a lot more pro-police after being a police officer. And it's all over education. I think education does that for all of us. That's why I know it's our job to help educate our community to what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah. We should publish our goals. Here's what we want to do, and here's how we plan to make it happen. Yeah. And I think all of those accountability measures, they would help hold us accountable to the public, as well as you would understand, here's what they're trying to do, this is why they're using that tactic, and we should be discussing those, ongoing dialogue, listening sessions, perhaps 2 or 3 times a year, where we're hearing from the public on what concerns they have of us, and we should be giving information back of, here's some things that we're seeing going on in the community, and how can you help us combat this? And I think we would have a partnership, and that helps build trust. The more you know the reasons why we're doing things, like it or not, at least you'll understand. Exactly. And that's what it's about.
Interesting. Shifting a little bit here, a recent Reuters poll found that 69% of African Americans believe that police unfairly target minorities. As a police officer and an African American, are those concerns warranted? Before becoming a police officer, did you ever experience any such discrimination?
Are those, when you quote that statistic, I believe it. Because for years, police within African American or minority communities have not been, in perception surveys, have not been stated to be favorable. Yeah. I think that's something that we have to continue to work on. In some ways of doing it is being reflective of that with your staff. And I think that's something that we do very diligently here at University Police. Our staff, if you look at our students as well as our full-time staff, they make up a little, I think the campus population is roughly 18% diverse. Our student staff is about 19%, and our full-time staff is a little bit over 30% diverse. So I think we really work hard at ensuring that we have a diverse staff that serves. That's on the surface, because you can look a certain way and still have some bad actions within your department. Also, we have to be focused on where are we going? And I think by having a mission, and our mission is really our guiding principles, our pillars of success, that all of our staff can understand that here's what we're going to be about, and here's what we're going to do, and we're going to do those listening sessions so that we can improve that level of trust and that communication to our public, especially those students or those groups who don't see us as favorable. We have to somehow break down that silo so that they can have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and that we're not working at odds. And I think that's very important. It's very difficult to do because if it was so easy, we would find that agency and duplicate it 1,000 times. But I know it's very hard, and it takes continual work to really have a good understanding of those populations who feel like they're not getting treated equally. And the second part of your question touched on, have I ever experienced any type of unequal treatment before? And a lot of times, yeah, the answer is yes. But I would say several of those occasions, after knowing the profession, I feel like they wasn't mistreatment. Going into it without the knowledge, in most of the cases, I felt like I was mistreated. But if I was mistreated 10 times wrong, 7 of them, after learning about the profession, I would say, it was probably me. 3 out of the 10, I would say, I probably was mistreated. And I would still feel that way now after knowing what I know. So I know there's bias exists, something that we're trying to work on nationally. That there's this, it's really not a new concept, but it's really getting a lot of more research and information put out about implicit bias. Those things that you don't know that you're doing that are really unconscious. And that's something that we have to think about, but also how do we train folks to not do those unconscious things? That's very difficult. And that's something that we're all needing help on, is how do we help folks think about those things that they just do unconsciously. And we're open to that. And we're going to go down that road to make sure our staff understands that also, because we all have to get there.
Yeah, I think more on that diverse staff angle. How many African Americans officers were on the staff here when you started, and how have you guys, I guess, maybe tried to change that over the years, or maybe look at that issue?
When I started at the university a little bit over 20 years ago, we didn't have any, and now at one time there were 4 African American officers, and now there are 3, and so we make it a point through our hiring. I think some of you see some of our things on our board where we're always looking at. We've been working with Steve Bryan and intercultural officers, trying to understand deeper implicit bias, social justice, but also look at our hiring process to think about what's special about working at the university and working for university police, and what will make us attract a more diverse group of candidates. And that's our #1 focus. Not that we're trying to hire a specific demographic, but are we trying to attract a diverse a group of candidates? And that's our essential goal.
Okay. In conclusion here, looking forward, what would you say to those in America, I mean, those people, especially the protesters, who've maybe lost trust in police in America?
I really hope that we can have just a sit-down discussion. So I would want to say to them, let's sit down and let's iron out what it is that we want to see from police. Because I don't believe they don't want to see any police. I think folks want police, you know, but what it is do you want out of your police force? We have to be able to articulate that and agree on, here's what we want. And so then you can hold us accountable to meeting that. Because at the end, we're public servants. We work for all of you. And really, you give us our charge and our level of authority. So let's help outline that. And I think through discussions, we can lay it out and we can come to an agreement on what we expect. And then we can have some internal reviews. We could have, you know, public review committees come in and evaluate what we do and how we do it. Because some of the things that we're hearing is like every police agency should be accredited. That's okay, but I believe it's bigger than that. It's specific things that should apply to every community that are unique to that community. We shouldn't treat we serve our students different than what a local police department would serve them, because we want to be unique to our campus community. And every community has its own little oddities and uniqueness, and that we should be tailored towards those. That we should, it's not a blanket check that we should have. There are some things that are blanket. We always should be honest. We always should have high integrity. We should have strong ethics. You know, our values have to be intact. But there are a lot of things that can be easily tweaked. How are we going to be about enforcement of certain crimes? Because I know all of us could agree some things are mischief and some things are crime. Some things we're going to be intolerable on. You know, if you're drunk and driving, you know, there's something we're going to draw the line and say we don't want that in our community. But if you're peeing behind a car at 4 a.m. in an alley, we might not want to arrest you for that. You know, we can come to some sort of agreement on. And I think as a community, in some communities they're going to say arrest them all the time. You know, so I think we have to be able to talk through a lot of different issues and figure out what the differences are, but also what those similarities are, and then we can reach agreement. We can educate each other. We can try some things, pull back, redo, because that's what life is also. You know, the older you guys get, you're going to find out some things that you done early on. You're going to say, man, I should have never done that. And sometimes you're going to find out yourself saying, man, I see why my parents did that. They weren't dumb as I thought they were. You know, that's the way life goes, and that's the way it goes. With what we're dealing with and what we're trying to accomplish is we have to be on the same page. So we got to be willing to try, pull back, evaluate, lunch it again, and be okay with it.
Okay. Well, that is all I have for you. I really appreciate you sitting down with us today, Clarence.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.